The Bernese wouldn't stop staring at the baby's mouth, and something was already wrong. Ilse Vandenbroek had spent 19 years as a labor and delivery nurse, and she knew what a healthy baby breathed like. Her son was breathing exactly like a healthy baby, and her dog was refusing to look away. Bruno, the Bernese mountain dog, was 98 pounds of slow patience, 7 years old. Tricolored, gentle-eyed, famous in the family for once falling asleep with a piece of pizza balanced on his nose because he had been told to wait. He had been in the house since long before Ilse and her husband Milo had married, since long before they had thought about a baby. Their son, Wolf, was 6 months old. He had been sleeping well, feeding well, laughing that morning. He was, by every measurement, Ilse's 19 years of clinical experience could produce. A completely fine baby, which was why Bruno's behavior that Thursday afternoon made no sense at all. He had followed her from room to room since about 3 p.m., not walking near her, trailing, 2 paces behind. When she set Wolf in the bouncer to eat, Bruno lay down 4 feet away and put his head flat on the tile floor and stared at Wolf's face. Not his eyes, his mouth. Ilse watched him do it. She noticed it because in 19 years of watching adults watch babies, she had learned that adults look at eyes and mouths in about equal measure. Bruno was looking at his mouth, only his mouth. By 5 p.m., Bruno was following Wolf's bouncer from room to room. When Milo came home from work, Bruno did not go to greet him at the door. The first time in 7 years he had failed to do so. Milo stood in the doorway holding his keys and said, "Is he sick?" Ilse said, "He hasn't done anything. He just won't stop watching Wolf." Milo said what any reasonable partner would say. "Maybe he's coming down with something. Let's see how he is tomorrow." They ate dinner. Bruno lay under the kitchen table between Wolf's high chair and the doorway. He did not eat. He did not ask to be fed. Ilse pushed a small piece of chicken toward him with her toe. He did not sniff it. At 8:30 p.m., she put Wolf in the crib. Bruno followed her into the nursery. She did not send him out. Something in her 19 years of watching bodies react to things told her that a dog who has followed a baby around for 5 hours and refuses to eat is a dog with information you do not have. She let him stay. At 9:15, she checked the monitor. Wolf was asleep. Bruno was lying on the floor beside the crib, and his head was no longer angled at the baby. He was staring at the ceiling. At 10:40, she got up to use the bathroom and stopped in the nursery doorway. Bruno was still on the floor, still staring at the ceiling. She followed the angle of his eyes. There was nothing there. A blank cream ceiling. A single ceiling fan. Off. No stain. No mark. No shadow. She said his name softly. He did not turn his head. At 11:30, she woke Milo. "Something is wrong. He's been staring at the ceiling for over 2 hours. Milo, groggy, said dogs stare at things. "Go back to sleep." She almost did. If you stay for stories about what animals sense before we do, you're in the right place. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. She went to the kitchen instead. She stood in front of the carbon monoxide detector on the wall. Green light. Working. Battery changed in October. She got a chair. She stood on it. She pressed the test button. The alarm shrieked for 4 seconds. It worked. She stood on the chair for a long time. Then she got down. She went to the drawer where they kept emergency contacts. She dialed the non-emergency fire dispatch, and she said, "This is going to sound strange. My dog will not stop staring at the ceiling of my baby's nursery. My detector says everything is fine. Can someone come out?" The dispatcher did not laugh. The dispatcher said, We'll have an engine there in 6 minutes. Fire Captain Ezra Kowalski arrived at 12:14 a.m. with 2 other members of the crew and a portable multi-gas monitor. He walked into the nursery. He looked at the dog. He put the monitor on the changing table. He watched the numbers for approximately 40 seconds. He did not say anything. He walked into the kitchen. He watched the numbers there for another minute. Then he came back to the doorway of the nursery, and he said calmly, in the voice fire captains use when they do not want to frighten anyone, "Ma'am, please, pick up your baby, wake your husband, and come with me outside, right now." They stood in the driveway. Kowalski explained. The furnace heat exchanger had a hairline fracture, a defect his crew would later trace to a factory recall that had never reached this family. Carbon monoxide had been venting slowly into the ductwork for hours, escaping into the nursery through the ceiling vent above the crib. The concentration at floor level, where Bruno had been lying, was elevated but survivable. At ceiling level, the layer the vent was feeding into, the reading was 3 times the acute danger threshold. The detector on the kitchen wall was working, but it was on the opposite side of the house, at outlet height, in a hallway with a closed door between it and the source. It had not yet been reached. Another 2, maybe 3 hours at that concentration, Kowalski said, looking at Wolf wrapped in a blanket in Milo's arms, and we would be having a very different conversation. Has your dog ever done something you couldn't explain until it was the only thing that made sense? Tell us in the comments. These stories deserve to be heard. They stayed at Ilse's sister's house for 2 days while the furnace was replaced and the ductwork cleared. When they came home, Bruno walked in first. He crossed the living room. He crossed the kitchen. He stood in the nursery doorway. He sniffed. He walked into the room. He walked to the spot beneath the vent where he had been staring, and he sniffed again. And then he turned around and lay down beside the crib in his normal position, and he closed his eyes. Ilse sat on the floor beside him. "I'm sorry it took me until midnight to trust you." Bruno did not open his eyes. He pushed his enormous head onto her knee and exhaled long and slow, and stayed there. Later, the veterinary respiratory specialist she consulted, Dr. Sacha Nordgren, Canine Olfaction Research, University of Bern, explained what Bruno had probably been doing all afternoon. Dogs read the exhaled breath of the humans they love. When ambient carbon monoxide begins to displace oxygen from hemoglobin, the ratio of gases on the exhale shifts. A dog picks that up long before the human notices any symptom, long before a home detector's threshold is met, long before a labor and delivery nurse with 19 years of experience would have any reason to be alarmed. Bruno had been watching Wolf's mouth because Wolf's mouth was telling him something Wolf himself did not know yet. Then, at some point in the evening, Bruno had detected the source overhead and had told Ilse the only way a dog can tell someone. He had lifted his eyes and stared at the ceiling until she followed. If stories like this matter to you, subscribe so you never miss the next one. The next one involves a dog who blocked a doorway for a full afternoon and would not let the family into their own attic.